My name is Leo Carter. I'm 19 years old and from Omaha, Nebraska. I had just finished my first year of college and decided to take a solo road trip to clear my head before diving into another semester. The open road felt freeing, and I enjoyed the peace of driving through long stretches of highway. But what happened during that trip changed my life forever and still gives me nightmares to this day. It was late afternoon, and I had been driving for hours. Somewhere in the middle of Kansas, I decided to pull over at a rest area. The place was eerily quiet, with only 1 or 2 cars in the lot. I parked my car and headed toward the bathroom, feeling the need to stretch my legs and relieve myself. As I entered, the air inside felt strange, stale, and heavy. There was no one else in sight until a man in his mid-40s stepped out of one of the stalls. He looked disheveled, wearing a dirty jacket and an old baseball cap. His eyes darted around nervously before they landed on me. "Hey man," he said, his voice shaky but insistent. "I need your help. My wife's hurt. She's in our car out back. She fell, and I can't lift her. Please, I don't know what to do." I froze for a moment. Something about him felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Still, the idea of someone being injured tugged at my sense of responsibility. "Where is she?" I asked hesitantly. "Out by the van," he said, gesturing with a quick nod toward the back of the building. I followed him, my gut telling me something wasn't right. The rest area was so deserted that even the slightest sound seemed amplified. As we turned the corner, I saw the van, a beat-up white one with no windows. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but before I could act, 2 men jumped out from behind the vehicle. Before I could scream, one of them shoved a cloth over my mouth and nose. The chemical smell was overwhelming, and I struggled to breathe. My limbs went weak as I tried to fight them off. I felt myself being dragged toward the van. Panic surged through me, but it was no use. They bound my hands and feet with duct tape, blindfolded me, and threw me inside. I don't know how long we drove, but it felt like hours. My heart pounded as I listened to their muffled voices. "He's young. His parents will pay up for sure," one of them said. Another voice argued, "What if they don't? We can't risk keeping him too long." Tears streamed down my face as the reality of my situation set in. They weren't just going to let me go. I started twisting my wrists against the tape, trying to loosen it, but it only dug deeper into my skin. Eventually, the van came to a stop. One of the men opened the door, and I heard him say, "Keep an eye on him. I'm going to make the call." The door slammed shut, but I noticed he hadn't closed it all the way. I knew this might be my only chance. Summoning every ounce of strength, I wriggled my hands until I felt the tape give slightly. It was painful, but the adrenaline kept me going. After what felt like an eternity, my hands were free. I quickly tore off the blindfold and worked on the tape around my ankles. The van was parked near a wooded area, and the other man seemed distracted, smoking a cigarette a few feet away. I silently pushed the door open and bolted into the trees. My legs burned and branches scratched at my face and arms, but I didn't stop. I could hear shouting behind me, their voices growing fainter as I ran deeper into the woods. Eventually, I reached the edge of the forest and saw a highway in the distance. Cars zipped by, oblivious to the terror I had just escaped. I stumbled out onto the shoulder, waving my arms frantically. A blue sedan screeched to a halt, and a woman rolled down her window. "Are you okay? What happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. "Please, call the police," I gasped, collapsing onto the ground. Within minutes, the highway patrol arrived. I told them everything as best as I could through my shaking and tears. They immediately launched a search for the van and the men. Later that night, I got a call from the officers. They had caught the kidnappers. Apparently, the men were part of a notorious group wanted for multiple kidnappings and extortion schemes across several states. I was lucky to escape, but the experience left me deeply shaken. Even now, I can't stop thinking about how easily things could have ended differently. It's terrifying to know how quickly a seemingly normal day can spiral into a nightmare. I'll never stop being grateful for that one moment of opportunity, the small crack in the van door that allowed me to survive. My name is Charlotte Green, and I'm 23 years old. I live in a small college town in Michigan, where everyone seems to know each other, or at least that's what I thought. I work part-time at a diner near campus to help cover my tuition. It's not the safest job. My shifts often end late, and I walk home alone. But what happened to me last Thursday still feels like something out of a nightmare. I never thought I'd come so close to disappearing forever. That night, my shift ran later than usual. The diner had a rush of customers, and I was stuck cleaning tables well past 11 p.m. When I finally stepped outside, the air was bitterly cold, and the streets were eerily quiet. Normally, I'd call a rideshare, but I was low on cash. My apartment was only 10 blocks away, so I figured I'd just walk. What could go wrong? I was halfway down Main Street when I noticed the van. A plain white van, no windows on the sides, driving slowly behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was someone looking for an address. But when it pulled up next to me, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The driver rolled down his window, revealing a scruffy-looking man in his 40s. His face was shadowed by a baseball cap, but his eyes glinted unnaturally under the streetlights. "Hey, miss, can you help me out? I'm trying to find Oak Ridge Drive." I froze for a second, but forced myself to stay calm. "It's a few blocks back. Take a left at the second light," I said, keeping my tone short. "Are you sure?" "I feel like I already passed it," he pressed, his voice oddly cheerful. I didn't respond this time. I just started walking faster, my hands gripping my bag tightly. The van didn't move. I could feel his eyes on my back, watching me. Then I heard the engine rev softly, and the van began creeping forward again. Panic started to creep in. I decided to take a shortcut through an alley, something I never do. But I just wanted to get off the main road and away from that van. Big mistake. As soon as I turned the corner, I saw him. A second man, standing in the shadows near a dumpster. He was tall, bulky, wearing a hoodie pulled tight over his face. Before I could even process what was happening, he lunged. I screamed as loud as I could, but his hand clamped over my mouth, muffling the sound. I kicked and flailed, but he was too strong. I remember the sickening stench of sweat and cigarettes as he dragged me back towards the van. "Got her," he grunted to someone. The van door slid open, and I was shoved inside so hard I hit my head against the metal floor. Everything was spinning, but I could still hear them. "Shut her up," one of them barked. "Her phone. Grab it." Rough hands yanked my bag away, and my phone was gone before I could even think to use it. The door slammed shut, and I heard the click of the lock. I was trapped. I fought the urge to cry. Panicking wouldn't help me. Instead, I forced myself to listen. "Where do we take her?" the driver asked, his voice low but urgent. "Warehouse first. Boss will decide," the other replied. "Warehouse, boss." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a random mugging. This was something much worse. As the van sped through the streets, I noticed something. A small latch on the inside of the back door. It was painted the same color as the van, almost blending in. An emergency release, maybe. The van slowed down, stopping at what I assumed was a red light. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, but I knew I had to act fast. I reached for the latch as quietly as I could, praying they wouldn't hear me. It felt stiff, like it hadn't been used in years. I pulled with everything I had, and suddenly, the door popped open. The driver yelled, "What the?" But by the time they realized what was happening, I was already out, hitting the pavement hard. My knees screamed in pain, but I didn't stop. I ran like my life depended on it, because it did. The street I landed on was thankfully busy. A group of people outside a bar turned to stare as I stumbled towards them, gasping for air. "Help me, please," I cried, my voice hoarse. Within minutes, someone called the police. The men didn't get far. The police caught them that same night, not far from where I escaped. Turns out, the van was linked to a human trafficking ring operating out of the area. I still can't believe how close I came to being one of their victims. It's been a week now, and I haven't been able to sleep much. Every time I close my eyes, I see that van or feel the man's hand grabbing me. I don't walk home anymore, no matter how short the distance. I carry pepper spray and a personal alarm everywhere I go. Some people tell me I was lucky. I don't feel lucky. I feel scared. But I'm alive, and for that, I'm grateful. Ready to feel a chill run down your spine? Join us in the shadows and dive into the world of terrifying tales and creepy encounters. Subscribe now to Shivers in the Dark and hit the bell so you never miss a story that keeps you up at night. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 29 years old, a delivery driver in a quiet Ohio town. My job is simple, and I've always liked the routine. But last week, everything changed. I ended up fighting for my life in a situation I never thought possible. It was a typical shift. My last delivery of the day was in a secluded neighborhood on the edge of town. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, and the place felt eerily quiet. The house was small, with peeling paint and a dim porch light. I grabbed the package, a heavy box, and knocked on the door. A man in his 50s answered. He smiled warmly, but his eyes had a strange, cold intensity. "Hey," he said. "Thanks for bringing this. It's heavier than I thought. Could you help me carry it to the basement?" I hesitated. We weren't supposed to enter customers' homes, but I didn't want to seem rude. Sure," I said reluctantly. I stepped inside, immediately hit by a damp metallic smell. The man shut the door behind me, and a chill ran down my spine. "The basement's this way," he said, leading me down a narrow hallway. I followed, clutching the box, my instincts screaming at me to leave. Before I could react, we stopped at the basement door. "Here, let me take that," he said. As I handed him the box, everything went black. When I woke up, my head throbbed, and my wrists felt raw. It was pitch dark, but I could feel cold metal digging into my skin. I tried to move, realizing I was chained to a wall. Panic gripped me as I pulled against the restraints. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled sound. "Hello," I whispered. No response, just soft whimpers. My eyes adjusted, and I saw them. 6 other people, chained like me. Their eyes were wide with terror, their mouths gagged. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a robbery or some sick prank. This man was a predator, and we were his prey. Hours passed, maybe longer. Eventually, the man came down carrying a tray of food and water. "Dinner time," he said, his tone casual, like we were his guests. I stayed silent, watching him. That's when I noticed a loose pipe near my feet. My heart pounded as I realized this might be my only chance. As soon as he turned his back, I reached for the pipe. It took all my strength to pull it loose. But when I did, I swung it hard. The sound of metal hitting his skull was sickening, but he went down instantly. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed his keys and fumbled to unlock my chains. Once I'd freed myself, I hurried to release the others. They were too weak and terrified to run, but I wasn't about to leave them behind. We crept upstairs and out the front door. My truck was parked outside, and I ran straight for it, grabbing my phone to call 911. Within minutes, the police arrived. The man was still unconscious when they found him, but what they discovered in the house made my blood run cold. There were hidden rooms, surveillance equipment, and evidence linking him to disappearances in other towns. He wasn't just a kidnapper, he was a monster. That night, 6 lives were saved, including mine. It's been a week, but I can't stop reliving it. The chains, the smell of that basement, the fear in the other's eyes. It's all burned into my memory. I quit my job the next day. No package is worth my life. I try to remind myself I survived, but the thought still haunts me. If I hadn't acted when I did, I wouldn't be here to tell this story.